Hello, this is my lovely daughter Brandy and her marvelous mommy. We're at the Festival of Nations. So Brandy and I are, you all wait for it because Brandy and I are going to do the So Gone Challenge. We work on our lyrics because we're lyricists. Yeah, that's what we're going to do. All right.
On April 21st, 2017, we lost a beautiful young lady, and today her mother is here to discuss it. We're also joined by Ira Rounsaville, a master's level social worker with experience in grief counseling. Thank you both for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for having me.
So, Felicia, what would you like to get out of our time here today?
I guess one of the main things is just to kind of share the process of losing a child and what that looks like and feels like and how to heal from that, if that's even possible.
You have any thoughts on that, Ira? I definitely see you as the specialist in this area.
Sure. So thank you for sharing that. That's helpful for me to know. I think that's something that we can certainly accomplish. I'll give a heads up and I'll ask some questions and kind of get a gauge on what you've done thus far. But you can anticipate there could be some unexpected emotions and feelings and thoughts that surface. I just want to, I guess, throw caution to the wind to understand that while this also may be a story to help someone else, there's also the possibility or the opportunity that you ultimately have a level of healing and strength, but it may look completely different than what you might intend. And the benefit may be more for you than it might necessarily be for the audience. Can that work
Yes.
for you, Felicia?
Yes.
Okay, very good.
Felicia, would you like to talk about what happened to Brandy?
My daughter, Brandy Hewley, she's my oldest child, my only daughter. She and I were very close. She was a very giving, kind-hearted, generous, and just beautiful soul. She was not having any difficulties in her adult life, to my knowledge. We remained close throughout her life and even into her passing. There weren't any issues that I was immediate aware of. When she passed, I was in Omaha, Nebraska, so I wasn't back home. It left me feeling really helpless. It was nothing that we had prepared for. She unfortunately died suddenly.
When you say home, were you talking about St.
I'm so
Louis?
sorry.
Okay.
St. Louis, Missouri. I'm sorry. Yes, St. Louis, Missouri. Yes, born and raised, and so was she. I had been residing in Omaha, Nebraska for a short period of time when she passed. And so, of course, I went back home. She wasn't sick or ill. She died suddenly. And unfortunately, there are still some unanswered questions surrounding her death. But I miss her every day. And I've gotten to a point which has taken me a long time to focus on and celebrate who she was while she was here, her life, and the good things surrounding her life. I had to choose to do that. That's definitely a choice you have to make because you can continue, of course, naturally to feed the pain of the circumstance, but it took me quite some time to choose to look at the good in her life and the good memories. So
When you say feed the pain, what does that mean for you?
well, when I say feed the pain, it was easier for me to just allow that hurt to continue to fester. Unfortunately, there is no time frame that hurt ceases. It can go on for the remainder of your life, and undoubtedly it will. It's just how you choose to celebrate her memory.
Gotcha. You also mentioned having some unanswered questions.
Sure. The circumstances surrounding her death have not been made clear to me. Here we are in 2024, and I have not received any closure. I have the specifics of how she passed. However, I just don't know what all the circumstances were completely. So with that being said, I have not, as her mother, acquired any closure. And it's been very difficult because I think that's important. At some point, that's important to totally heal 100%, which I am not.
That sounds like that would almost double the pain. It's one thing to lose someone so dear to you, your child that you love, but to also not have answers. That sounds very difficult to deal with.
Yes, and it has been.
And so are you suggesting that is it the coroner's office? Is it medical professionals? Where are you seeking or where haven't you gotten the answers that you're looking for?
The coroner's office and the medical office, we sort of what I would consider, because it was my own personal experience and my own journey with them, because of my persistence, we almost formed a sort of bond because there was constant communication back and forth with me, waiting upon results and things of that nature. So they were very cooperative when it came to that. So I am not referencing questions regarding that part. That was answered. There was closure on that. It was just more so what led up to her death and the surrounding people she was with. I was not told or given all the answers that I felt I needed to give me closure in that regard. I felt that there was just some withholding because of fear, and it was a scary situation. So those who were familiar with what happened and who were there, I'm sure they had their own trauma from the incident as well. And then as time went on, in addition to fear, I started feeling some sense of them wanting to protect me, which I personally felt like they didn't have a right to do that. You still need to let me know and let me process it. So that's kind of where I was for the most part of her death.
Got it. And now living with those unanswered questions, how have you processed and how have you supported yourself in your grief?
It's been hard. For one thing, what I chose to do is I chose not to acknowledge her death and choose to celebrate her life and her birthday. And that's what I choose to do. That helps me get through that. So that's one of the main things I do. Of course, now I'm able to think of her more fondly. I think of good memories and surround myself with those memories, which keeps me going and to give me some sort of peace. And I prefer to believe that she is actually, we hear this, most of us have heard this our whole life, and it is something that we use as a coping mechanism. But I truly, honestly have chosen to believe that she is at peace and she's in a better place, although I'm not really understanding in the natural form why she had to leave me so early. I understand the process of death and that we all will have to face it someday, but it's just really hard when it's so close to home.
For sure. For sure. How persistent are you? Because it sounds like there's some people in her life that you're seeking to get answers, those questions answered, right? I think your insight is really on point in that those individuals experience a level of trauma too. Even in their best intentions, they don't get to choose for you to protect you or not. More important point is them being able to manage and handle their level of trauma and grief. Unfortunately, that leaves you with unanswered questions. But how have you been navigating that, and how persistent are you? Or have you kind of settled at, I'm just going to have to live with these unanswered questions?
I've come to the realization that there is a possibility that I may leave this earth not knowing fully what happened. However, my prayer and my consistent prayer is, Lord, give me strength to be able to accept what happened and be able to move on. So, before I leave here, that's been my prayer, and it's been a consistent prayer. I have not made total peace with it. I'm just going to be honest.
Yep.
because I think that's important during this format. I have not made total peace with it, but I would like to be able to know what happened. I do feel like there is a part of me that needs to prepare myself. And then there are times I feel like I'm ready to receive, process, and heal fully. I desperately want that. But I also feel like that may not ever come. And that's the part that I work on daily, just to accept the fact that I may never ever know. But my desire and my prayer is to know before I leave here. And that's what I would like more than anything else.
Then I'm going to kind of tighten the screws a little bit in this conversation and ask you a challenging question. Anything I ask you, you can always choose to answer or not. But what do you think happened in your heart, in your mind, even as the questions are unanswered? And really what I'm asking you is, where has your mind gone in this time when you've had unanswered questions? Because you know this better than I can tell you, but all of this happens to all of us, right? When we have questions that go unanswered, after a while, we start answering them ourselves, right? And that could be right, wrong, up, down, left or right, in the middle, or somewhere in between. But the challenging part of that is that sometimes they can be on the left, sometimes they can be on the right. And then again, as Terrence mentioned earlier, that might even be harder to handle and carry because it's an ambiguous response, it's an ambiguous answer. But I'll explain why I'm asking you that question, should you choose to answer it. But what have you thought is the actual cause or was the cause?
What I do know is, per the medical and the coroner and the medical office, it was an accident. That part has been confirmed. It was something that, had she not had the unfortunate series of events that occurred, had they not occurred simultaneously, she more than likely would still be here with us. So that's my understanding. It was accidental. It was not something that she did on purpose. I've got some other encouraging information, but it's nothing definite as to what may have happened. And you're right. Over time, I have, especially initially when she first passed, I never believed the information that I was given and that I was told. However, I also was so far removed from what I was initially informed of by the medical office and the coroner that I didn't know that that was the result.
That makes perfect sense. So having that information and knowing the individuals or individual that can answer these questions, are more of your unanswered questions about them confirming or even admission in some regards to the things that you don't necessarily want to believe or want to believe? Or what is it about, and I'm going somewhere with this, what is it about those individuals answering your questions?
Me personally, it would mean the world to me because these were individuals that my daughter chose to surround herself with. She was a very caring person. Unfortunately, I believe she was naive. She loved people unconditionally. I don't think that she would have blamed or saw them at being at fault of anything, but because I don't know what happened, these particular individuals were there. They know exactly what transpired, and it would be so helpful, regardless of what that was. I still would like to know. And I think at the end of the day, one of my main concerns was, did she suffer? That means more to me than anything else. Everything else is just circumstantial to me at this point in my life. I just want to know if she suffered. And they would be the ones that can tell me exactly what her last moves were, her last emotions, what was anything said. Those are the questions that I like to have answered because I think that they would be so helpful in giving me closure.
Have you had an opportunity to ask those very specific questions, or have your questions looked a little or sounded a little different? Does that make sense?
They definitely sounded a little different initially.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, they definitely sounded a little different initially. This is my hope and my desire to one day be able to sit down with those loved ones who she surrounded herself with, who I know she loved and cared for, and for them to come to a place mentally, come to a place where they feel comfortable enough to share with me truthfully what happened with no blame.
Yeah.
That's not, I can be honest with you, that's not where I was at initially.
Yeah.
That's not where I was
Mm-hmm.
in 2017. I've had time to process this, and I just want to know, if they can't answer anything else for me, I would love for the Lord to put it upon their hearts to tell me, no, from what we understand. And they will never fully know, but from their perspective and from what they observed, this is what happened. I want the truth. That's all. I just would like the truth.
Sure.
So I can move on.
For sure. So here's why I asked that question, and I want to share this with you and for the listening audience who may be experiencing or is going through what you're going through. When most things happen, like I have a saying, knowing is half the battle, right? If I have 50% of the information of why something happened, like I can figure out the rest. But when we don't have even the 50% of knowing, it leaves us with open wounds and no closure. Part of that knowing, though, is trying to find a source of blame, a source of accountability, a source to say, well, this person can give me this information or this thing can explain it, right? So what grief does is, and again, sometimes it's real, sometimes it's false. It gives us this false sense of believing that if I get this information, then I'll feel better. It's almost as even if you have somebody who's terminally ill and you have an opportunity to spend time before they pass and transition, and you're thinking like, okay, yeah, I'll be fine, I'll be fine. And then when it happens, it takes on a whole new life, it takes on a whole new experience, which is why grief is so tricky, because all four of us can lose a loved one and all four of us will grieve very differently. And we can say that we had the same exact relationship with that particular loved one, but we're all still going to grieve different. Some going to grieve a little harder, a little longer. And again, our minds are going to go all over the place. But part of what happens is part of that denial is also trying to find a culprit. It's the scapegoat. Where's that comfort blanket to say, this is why it is. And until I know that, can't move on. And sometimes we don't have an opportunity, and that opportunity may not come. And 7 years ago, like you said, you weren't asking the way that you just eloquently asked during this video conference, right? And those individuals, even where they were in that moment, to be able to receive how you came for them, and they're, again, in their own grief and where they were struggling, the timing probably wasn't right, which is why I asked you, did you ask that question? Maybe now, because of where you are and there's been some time and space, and if you are able to ask in the way that you're presenting even here today, it may be an opportunity to get that answer. But I would temper the expectation, because sometimes answer questions produce more questions. Because then what happens is we realize that, wait, I still don't feel closure. Like I got my answer, but I still feel bad. It gets into this vicious cycle, which is leading me to my ultimate point. In grief, so there's an argument about all the stages of grief and whether, they don't go in order or what have you. Some people don't even transition out of things, and it all happens in different ways, right?
Correct.
But part of that acceptance and managing all the emotions that come with it is just really getting to that point of saying, how am I going to continue to live knowing that someone that I loved and cared for dearly is no longer with me? How am I going to continue to live knowing that I don't have all the answers, that I wasn't given the peace and comfort that I so seek? Because if we're being 1000% honest, I don't care what faith you believe. The difference is that the peace that you're going to receive is not going to come from man. It's not going to come from somebody else's answer. I'm Christian. I'm going to say it's going to be God's grace and God's peace that's going to ultimately comfort me or comfort us in our time of need and in our time of grief. And so whatever anybody's faith system is or whatever belief system is, understanding when you're looking for things from out here to kind of give you the peace inside, you're generally going to be let down, right? And again, part of that is we seek from the outside, and there's nothing wrong with it. Like, there are going to be things that you are going to get from the outside, and it'll be temporary peace, it'll be temporary comfort, right? But the other part of that is internally, though. How do we manage and get to the point where we say, okay, this is my life, this is the truth. I don't have this answer, I don't have that answer, and my child isn't here. And you rehearse the life that she had, you rehearse the relationship that you had with her. And as you said, you start remembering the positive things, and you don't give an anniversary of her death, and you celebrate the anniversaries of her life and her birth and those sorts of things. And so those are processes and ways that we begin to have a level of comfort and peace and wholeness. But ultimately, it is what happens when we don't have all the answers. And then from that point, we have to say, I may not ever get them. And then you have to draw a line in the sand and say, okay, after today, I won't worry about getting that answer. And here's the other thing. When we're seeking information, we often forget what we already have. And our time gets so focused on getting that one thing or getting those few things that we ignore the things that we have. And so you do have positive memories. You do have the information from the coroner and the medical examiner. You do have all of these things. And so if we look and we take inventory, we have more than what we desire, right? And if we find a place and an opportunity to live in that space, that is what allows us to keep going. That is what allows us to keep moving. And that is what allows us to manage our grief. Grief is a process. And again, for everybody, all four of us will manage grief in way different ways. And again, it was your daughter, but it was Jamisa's niece, right? And so she's impacted just the same, right? Terrence is impacted. Everybody is impacted. This is not like only one person gets it. And even the individuals who were present and around, and they were impacted as well. And you're only going to manage this in your own way. But being the mother, obviously your grief is going to be way different than most, if not all of us, based on your relationship, based on, again, that you gave birth to her as your daughter, right? And then a whole bunch of other circumstances. And so now in this moment, as you continue to move forward, my challenge to you, or my encouragement to you, is to take assessment and take inventory of what you have. Let those questions, those unanswered questions, lie dormant for a while, and live in the things that you know, and not allow the unknown to fuel your grief. Does that make sense?
Perfectly.
Felicia, I learned through our experience here together today that I started this show off wrong. I started off by indicating the day your lovely daughter passed. Can you tell us when her birthday is and tell us anything you'd like for us to know about her?
That's good, sir.
Her birthday is November the 23rd, and we were just referencing that's one of a big holiday for our family, and she was always present. She was always part of that. And so that's something else we have to navigate through, because every 23rd, and I think even one of the years, leap year, it fell on Thanksgiving. So it's something that we have fond memories of her, but it is hard because we acknowledge that her presence is no longer there, but we also acknowledge a presence that is there, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
So not there physically, but there in spirit and in heart. So she's not been forgotten. Time tends to move on, but the memories are still solidified, and they're solid, and they're real, and we truly miss her. So
We salute you and we thank you, Felicia.
you're very welcome.
Love you,
Thank
sister.
Love you too, sister.
We'll see you all next time.
Thank you.